Can you hear me? All right, there we go. Good morning, everybody. My name is Malik, and me and my wife, we have the privilege of leading the campus ministry, who are doing an awesome job at doing the service this morning. So can we give them a round of applause? So me and my wife, we lead the campus ministry, and it's been awesome. And so today, this whole service is a campus-led service. And so you got a lot of young people up here giving their heart to God. And with the sermon today, it'll be me and Jeriko doing a two-part lesson. And the title of it is All for One and One for All. And so the concept is, it comes from the Three Musketeers. All right, so I don't know if you know much about them. They have this saying is one for all for one and one for all. And I didn't know what it meant up until I had to write this lesson. And so now I do, and the idea of it is that the all or the group, they take action to benefit the one. And then the one for all is the one take action to benefit the all. And so Jericho's going to focus on the all for one. And that's the group making sure they take action to take care of the one. And then I'll do the one for all. And so with that, we'll let Jeriko come on up and preach.
Well, hi, everybody. I am Jeriko, and I'm just super honored to just give this message about being all for one. And the first scripture I would like to turn to is 1 Corinthians 12, verse 21. And excuse me, because my voice is running out. All right. It says, the eye cannot say to the hand, I don't need you. And the head cannot say to the feet, I don't need you. On the contrary, those parts of the body that seem to be weaker are indispensable. And the parts that we think are less honorable, we treat with special honor. And the parts that are unpresentable, we treat with special modesty. It say, while our presentable parts need no special treatment, but God has put together the body, giving a greater honor to the parts that lack it, so that there should be no division in the body, but its parts should be equal and concerned for each other. If one part suffers, every part suffers with it. If one part is honored, every part rejoices with it. And this is an awesome passage. It just talks about the body of Christ and just going through things together. And that's what it means to be all for one. In the beginning, it says that I cannot say to the hand, I don't need you. And that is us. Like, we all are a part of the body, and we all need each other. And going a little down in this passage, it's a calling for us to just grow in different areas. That's what I got from it. In verse 25, it say, we all should have equal concerns for each other. So that means it shouldn't be no favoritism. Like, I shouldn't be, I don't need my hand and I'm less concerned. No, if I hit my hand on something, I'm going to grab my hand. And we are the body, and it's just like us. If I stumble and I'm struggling with something, somebody will come together and just help us with what I need. Later down in the passage, it say God has put the body together. God is literally placing us together. It say giving honor to the parts that lack it. Again, growing in different areas, we all need each other to grow. Everybody in this room, y'all can just take a quick look for me. Look back and forth at each other. Like, y'all all need each other to grow in different areas. I might be able to just lead in different ways, but I don't know a lot about cyber. I need Alicia to help me with cyber. I don't know a lot about song leading. I need Shondell to help me with song leading. And just how it talks about we are the body. Like, we always joke around. And I have a saying for Alyssa. I call her my leg. I'd be like, hey leg, I see her. She'd be like, hey arm. And then we have Newbie. I'd be like, my Achilles. Like, and we joke around. We joke around, but it's like, okay, like without the leg and the Achilles, you can't, like, you'll be like, like, stumping, you'll be hopping on 1 feet. And that's literally like how we will be spiritually. Like, we will be literally like just hopping around on one leg spiritually without each other. And in verse 26, it talks about just suffering for each other. And this is awesome. Again, being one for all, we have to go through things with each other. And I think about the people that studied the Bible with me. They suffered for me. I think about Jay. I think about JV, Myra, and Malik. All these people suffer with me. JV, he gave me a lot of rides and never asked for gas money. Always would give me rides. Malik, he was very patient with me. I studied for a long time, and he was just still like, okay, he's gonna get it. He's gonna get it. And it was my sin that made me struggle, or made me suffer, so that they suffered. I struggle with just a lot of like pride, a lot of I'm very independent, so it was a lot of pride there. I wasn't like catching on very quick. And when I was still like just fall back into a whole bunch of sin and just be unopen about it, so I wouldn't grow.
Come on, Jeriko.
Okay, and I gotta ask you this question: are you willing to suffer for each other? Are you willing to suffer to see somebody do the things that you want to do? And in Philippians, we can turn there. Philippians 2, verse 3 to 4. Okay, it say, do nothing out of selfish ambition or vain conceit. Rather, in humility, value one another's above yourselves, not looking to your own interests, but to the interests of others. To be all for one, we have to honor one another above ourselves, even again if it's something that we want. And I just like reflect on all the things just God been doing in my life and other people's lives, and I'm like, okay, God, this is awesome. This is awesome. And I'm like, okay, my heart can turn to, I wanted that. God, I wanted that. I wanted to do this. I wanted to lead this. I wanted to be here. And to be all for one, you can't have the heart. You have to be a team player. It takes a team to win a game. You cannot do it alone. And this is literally like all about what the Bible is about. Like, again, Jesus wasn't alone. He had his 12, and then he had the 120. And now he have us. And we all, again, need each other to conquer things. And I want to go to another verse, which is John 15:13. And that was my point. I'm sorry about that. The point one was all for one and one for all. That was the only point. In John 15, verse 13, it say, greater love has no one than this, to lay one's lives down for a friend. And this is awesome. And this is literally, again, bringing it back to that all for one. Like willing to lay your life down to see somebody else grow in a different area, to help each other conquer different things. And this is just an awesome passage because it talks about, again, laying your life down for a friend. And this is what Jesus did to us. Jesus laid his life down for us so that we can do greater. He said we will do greater than he been doing. And the challenge is just to lay our lives down for a friend. Like, again, we are all one body. We all need each other. We cannot grow without each other. Like, again, I need my Achilles and I need my leg. Like, we all need each other. So just be all for one. Be a team player. Think about the people that you can help by just suffering for them and going through the same things, because we all need to grow in different areas. And with that, I'll give you Malik.
Hello again. I feel like you guys been seeing me all day. Hello. So my portion is the one for all. And the idea of mine is that the one that takes action to benefit the all. And so while I was writing this, I was thinking of different people throughout history who took a stand for something that a lot of people did benefit from, or we're still benefiting from today. And so the first person I thought of was Abraham Lincoln. All right. Then I thought of Martin Luther King Jr. Then I thought of Gandhi. The brother fasted for a very long time, got very skinny for a cause. He suffered for it. And then the biggest one was Jesus Christ. In his stand, we're continuing to see the impact today. His stand it changed the direction of history. And so all their stands, other people benefited from. And so we're going to focus on two different people in the Bible that took a stand that other people benefited from. And so we'll read about Esther. Now, Esther is awesome because she was a beautiful Jewish girl that ends up marrying King Xerxes. And so as she's his wife, she has a relative named Mordecai. Now, Mordecai, he finds out there's a guy named Haman who plans, he's plotting to like destroy the Jews. So he's having this plan, and Mordecai's like, let me tell my cousin. So you got to remember, Esther is married to the king. And so he tells Esther, hey, Haman, he's plotting to kill the Jews, which is her people. He's like, you got to go speak to the king. And so we're going to pick up in verse 9. So Esther 4, verse 9. And so in verse 9 it says, so Hatshepsut came back and reported Mordecai words to Esther. Then Esther spoke to Hatshepsut and ordered him to reply to Mordecai. All the king's servants and the people of the king provinces know that for any man or woman who comes to the king in the inner courtyard who is not summoned has only one law, that he be put to death, unless the king holds out to him the golden scepter so that he may live. And I have not been summoned to come to the king for these 30 days. And they reported Esther's words to Mordecai. Then Mordecai told them to reply to Esther, do not imagine that you in the king's palace can escape any more than all the other Jews. For if you keep silent at this time, liberation and rescue will arise for the Jews from another place, and you and your father's house will perish. And who knows whether you have not attained royalty for such a time as this. And so remember, he tells Esther this plan, and he's like, you got to go talk to the king. Now, at this time, King Xerxes had a law that if you come to the king and you're not summoned, then the law requires, if he does not give out his golden scepter, you are to be put to death. So basically, Mordecai is asking her to put her life on the line to save the Jews. And so now Esther, she's very aware of the law, and she tells him like, hey, if I do this, there's a possibility that I may die because he has not summoned me. And now Mordecai's response, he's like, do not imagine that just because you're in the king's palace that you won't suffer the same fate as the Jews. He's like, just because you're in the king's palace does not mean you're safe. But then he tells her, he says, well, he said, who knows? Maybe you came to royalty for such a time as this. So he's like, maybe the reason that you're the queen in the first place is to save your people, to save the Jews. And so you got to understand that it takes one. It takes one to take a stand for righteousness. And then we're gonna read a little further in verse 15, and we're going to see Esther's response to this. And in verse 15 it says, then Esther told them to reply to Mordecai, go gather all the Jews who are found in Susa and fast for me and do not eat or drink for 3 days, night or day. I and my attendants also will fast in the same way. And then I will go to the king, which is not in accordance with the law. And if I perish, I perish. So Mordecai went away and did just as Esther had commanded him. So now this is awesome. After she hears these words it came from a third person, but after she hears this from Mordecai, her mindset now is, if I perish, I perish. So now you can read it. In the beginning, she was a little fearful, but now she got a sense of courage. And so she's like, now, okay, if I'm going to do this for my people, and if I die, I die. And this is her mindset. And so you got to understand, it only takes one. She was willing to risk her life for the people, for her people. And because he tells her, hey, if you don't, then God's going to send somebody else to do it. And so you got to ask yourself, is God asking you to take a stand for something right now? Has God asked you to take a stand for someone throughout the week? Is there people you haven't shared with that God wanted you to take a stand for and speak? You got to understand that it only takes one. And it only takes one to commit to God, then your whole family will commit. It only takes one to stand for righteousness at your job, then you can change the environment. It only takes one to live a godly lifestyle in school, and that gives your classmates an opportunity to know God. It only takes one to have humility in their household, And therefore, you can have a spiritual household if one just chooses to take a stand. You got to understand it only takes one. And for Esther, she was the one that took a stand. And if you read later, she ended up saving her people. And the king ended up, he ended up extending his golden scepter to her. God was on her side. Why? Because she took a stand. All right, let's read about David in 1 Samuel 17. It only takes one. 1 Samuel 17. And I'm pretty sure all of us know this story. All right, so this is David and Goliath. All right, so now just a little backstory. So we'll read chapter 17 and verse 26. But before I read, so at this moment, you got David, he's a teenager, and he's taking care of the sheep. And his father asks him, hey, can you go take this food to your brothers who are off at war against the Philistines? All right, so he tells David to go take this food to his brothers. And now during this war, you got Goliath who is on the Philistine side. And he's shouting this defiance. And it says that he shouts this defiance towards God for 40 days. And it says when he would come out, the Israelites will flee. That includes his brothers. So they're fleeing every time he shouts this defiance. And so David comes up and he's giving this food to his brothers. And he's having kind of like this little conversation with them. And then it says that he heard the defiance being shouted. And so I could just imagine David's talking to his brothers. Hey, bro, I got this food. Dad told me to bring it. We got some good stuff. And then he hears this defiance and he's like, it's like his whole attention turned. And so I can just imagine it's almost like a superhero. You think Superman's having a conversation. He can hear everything. And then he hears a scream and he's like, oh, it's time to go. And so it says that David heard it. And so that's where we'll pick up in verse 26. In verse 26, it says, then David said to the men who were standing by him, what will be done for the man who kills this Philistine and rid Israel of this disgrace? For who is this uncircumcised Philistine that he dares to defy the armies of the living God? The people answered him in agreement with this statement, saying, this is what will be done for the man who kills him. Now Eliab, his older brother, heard him when he spoke to the men, and Eliab's anger burned against David, and he said, why is it that you have come down? And with whom have you left those few sheep in the wilderness? I myself know your insolence and the wickedness of your heart, for you have only come down in order to see the battle. But David said, what have I done now? Wasn't it just a question? So you got David, when he hears this defiance, he gets concerned about it. So he's like, okay, what's going to be done about this disgrace? Because you got Goliath disrespecting the army of the living God. So in his thought process, he just wants to protect God's honor. And so he's asking questions. He's like, what's going to be done? And now there was a reward for the person that killed him. It was you get to marry Saul's daughter. So you get to marry Saul's daughter. So it was a nice gift. But he's more concerned with protecting God's honor. And then you got his big brother, Eliab. And he's like, okay, why have you come down here? He's like, and with whom have you left those few sheep? So it's almost like he's viewing David as like he's neglecting his job of protecting the sheep. And then he's like, hey, I know how sinful you are. You only come down to watch the battle. So you got Eliab. He gets very critical of his brother. And all David's concern was what's going to be done about this man. And what you got to understand is when you take a stand, oftentimes people will get very critical of you. And the reason being is because oftentimes you're taking for a stand for something they also know they should be taking a stand for. So you got Eliab. Eliab's been at the battle for 40 days and he did nothing. David's been there for a few minutes and he's ready to do something. And so you see the difference in heart is David's willing to take a stand when his big brother isn't. And oftentimes people are going to be critical of you when you take a stand for something that they know they should also be doing. And now I've been on the not David's side. I've been Eliab before. All right. So there was a brother who led the campus ministry some time back. And we were planning something, and I'm be honest, I didn't like his ideas. I just thought they were bad ideas. I'm like, this is not going to work. This is not going to be successful. And so in my heart, I was just getting very critical of him. And then we did it, and it was okay. But now that I look back on it, he wasn't the problem. All right, his bad idea also was not the problem. I was the problem. Because if I see something isn't excellent, why wouldn't I help it be excellent? That should be the mindset. If something doesn't look right, I should help it look right. If something isn't excellent, I should help it be excellent. If you read throughout the story of David and Goliath, nobody offered to fight Goliath in place of David. You got to remember, David's the youngest on the battlefield. He's a teenager. All these other men are grown. And nobody told David, hey, I'll fight him in your place. David was the only one to take a stand. And even Saul, he gave him his armor. Instead of like putting on his own armor and going to battle, he's like, hey, you can have my armor. And so he still didn't do anything. But what you got to understand is when you take a stand for God, great things happen. And it inspires other people. So let's read on. Let's go to verse 48. So in verse 48, it says, then it happened, when the Philistines came closer to meet David, that David ran quickly toward the battle line to meet the Philistine. And David put his hand into his bag and took from it a stone and slung it and struck the Philistine on his forehead. And the stone penetrated his forehead and he fell on his face to the ground. So David prevailed over the Philistine with the sling and the stone. He struck the Philistine and killed him, and there was no sword in David's hand. Then David ran and stood over the Philistine and took his sword and drew it out of his sheath and finished him and cut off his head with it. When the Philistines saw that their champion was dead, they fled. Then the men of Israel and Judah rose up and shouted, and they pursued the Philistines as far as the valley and to the gate of Ekron. So right here you got David fighting Goliath. And it says that he runs to the battle line. So he's urgent about it. And so he runs to the battle line. He grabs a little stone out of his little pocket, grabs a stone, he puts it in his sling, and he whips it. All right. And then it says it hit him in his forehead. Boom. And it said it penetrated. Now, I can only imagine David's a teen, so I don't think he's that strong, for it to do that type of damage. So that means God had to be with him. All right. And so he throws this stone, it kills Goliath, and then he goes to Goliath's dead body. He takes out Goliath's sword and cut off his head with it. This is a great victory. And then you see the response of the Philistines in the Israelites. It says that when the Philistines seen that their champion was dead, it says that they fled. But then it says that the Israelites rose up and shouted. It's almost like they did a war cry. They shouted, and it says that they pursued the Philistines as far as the valley. So the Israelites, they went, before David had this victory, they went from fleeing to being on a pursuit. And that's what happened when you take a stand. In the beginning, you're alone. But then once people see you have a great victory, they want to join in on the battle. And so the Israelites, they wanted to join in on the battle. They're like, oh, this is awesome. What is there to be afraid of? And so you got to understand that when you have a great victory, it'll inspire others to do great things as well. And so you can't be afraid to stand for God. You can't be afraid to stand for righteousness, and you can't be afraid to stand alone. Oftentimes, we shy back or we shrink back from doing what's right out of fear. Because when you take a stand, you don't necessarily know how the outcome is going to be. And so sometimes because of the fear of the unknown, we'll shrink back. Or we'll shrink back because we have a fear of change. And so there's many reasons as to why we won't take a stand. But you got to understand, if you take a stand, great things happen. And there's a time in my life this is like in the beginning of my discipleship with God. And in my family, my family are very strong-willed and strong-minded. And so when you do anything that's kind of outside of the norm, you're going to get some flack for it. And so so with my family, like I kind of grew up in a way like the mindset is family is everything. And so my family would ask me to do things that were unspiritual or ungodly. And they're like, well, I'm asking you to do it. Can you just do it for me? And so, and that's in the world, I used to do it. You know, it's like, this is my family. They just asked me to do something, you know, it won't take a lot of time. But then when I became a disciple, it's like my vision or my view of things changed. And so now it goes from me doing these things for them, where now it's like I got to stand for righteousness for God. And so I had to start to say no to things. And they didn't like that too much. You know, and a lot of persecution came behind the no's. And they couldn't understand that I was just doing it. It's not because I don't want to help them. I was just doing it for the sake of my relationship with God. And sometimes when you do things for the sake of your relationship with God, it ruffles feathers. And it just ruffled their feathers. But by me taking a stand, and you see that my little brother's now a disciple. By my big brother taking a stand, which is Marvell, some of you know him, some of you don't. By him taking a stand, and he went through a lot of the same stuff I had to go through. If he wouldn't have took a stand, I also wouldn't be here. So by him taking a stand, I also had an opportunity to have a true relationship with God. And so you got to understand, it only takes one. And so ask yourself, why haven't I been that one? You have the ability to change your world. You have the ability to influence the people around you. And all it takes is for you to take a stand. Take a stand for your relationship with God. If you choose God, other people will have the opportunity to also choose God. This is what it means to be one for all. Because yes, I chose God for God, but I also knew the benefits and the ripple effect that it will have long term. There are so many people that now has an opportunity because I chose to choose God. And so, all right, and so I want to end off with a scripture. Let's go to Hebrews 10. It only takes one. And you could be that one if you choose to. All right, Hebrews 10 in verse 37. Hebrews 10 verse 37, and it says, for yet in a very little while, he who is coming will come and will not delay. But my righteous one will live by faith, and if he shrinks back, my soul has no pleasure in him. So you got to understand is when you choose not to stand up for righteousness, it's a lack of obedience to God. Because God's going to put on your heart when you need to be righteous, when you need to do something spiritual. And oftentimes we shrink back. And it says that God has no pleasure in the one that shrinks back. So have a courage. You got to be bold and you got to be faithful. And so the challenge is to evaluate in the areas that you have not took a stand and choose to stand up for those things. And this can be different areas in your life, but you got to choose to take a stand and to watch how God changes your world. And to God be the glory.
All right, guys, let's give it up one more time for the speakers. Amen. You may be asking, Victor, what are you doing up here? It's campus service. Aren't you like 40 and have like 12 kids? No, I'm only 35. And somebody has to keep a check on the campus ministry, right? So that's why they have me up here. Just make sure that they're doing things right. But what a pleasure and honor has been to be part of the campus ministry. And, Malik and Alexis and Paige, who work for the church, who actually, in part of the campus ministry, they have really done their incredible job leading the way. So thank you so much, guys, for being the example. And song leaders, thank you so much for your worship service. It was great. It's amazing. Shout out to Chandel and Luani who work, and Candace and everybody in there who work with the campus ministry. With the song ministry. Thank you so much for your help. Lex, Lexus, we call him Lex, right? She talked about the cross means confidence for her at this time. And she talked about how, it takes confidence to trust in God. Okay. And she talked about how there's moments in her life that she hasn't been very confident and she can see that there was lack of trust in God. But, she talked about how with confidence, it helps you deal with the pressure. Without confidence in what you're doing, you're not going to handle the pressure. It's easier to quit than handling the pressure. So whatever pressure that God is putting on you, you know what he's going to keep doing? Putting more pressure and then more pressure until you break. Because being broken is what God desires, a broken and contrite heart. So whatever pressure you're going through, don't fight it. Just welcome the pressure. Because it's without pressure, you can't have diamonds. You just have charcoal. So thank you, Lex. Appreciate it. And then